General Valdris stood on the bridge of the massive Zephyrian command ship. His 6 eyes focused on the holographic display showing the human fleet approaching. The ships looked crude compared to the sleek vessels of the Galactic Confederation. Metal plates welded together with visible seams, engines that burned too bright, and weapon systems that seemed randomly placed across their hulls. "These are our new allies?" Commander Thek asked, his voice carrying the typical Kronari growl. The warrior species had joined the Confederation 50 years ago, bringing their disciplined military might to the Alliance. They looked like they built their ships from scrap metal. Valdris nodded slowly. The humans had only made contact with the Confederation 6 months ago. Their planet Earth sat on the edge of known space. Most species ignored that region because nothing interesting ever happened there. But when the Void Devourers started their latest expansion, the Confederation needed every ship they could get. The Void Devourers were not like other species. They did not negotiate or trade. They consumed everything in their path: planets, ships, entire civilizations. Their dark vessels moved through space like hungry beasts. And wherever they went, nothing remained. "Sir, the human admiral is requesting permission to board," reported Lieutenant Kess, her blue Zephyrian skin changing color as she spoke. It was a sign of nervousness. "Very well. Have them escorted to the war room." 20 minutes later, Admiral Sarah Chun walked into the war room. She was smaller than Valdris had expected. Humans were tiny compared to most Confederation species. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations. Her brown hair was pulled back, and her dark eyes moved quickly around the room, taking in everything. "Admiral Chun," Valdris said, giving the traditional Confederation greeting. "Welcome aboard the Starbreaker. We are grateful for your assistance." Chun nodded. "Thank you, General. My fleet is ready to fight." Commander Thek leaned forward. His massive frame made the human admiral look even smaller. "Your ships appear unusual. What is their combat capability?" "They shoot, they move, they take hits," Chun said simply. "What else do you need to know?" Valdris and Thek exchanged glances. Most species would provide detailed technical specifications, battle records, and tactical preferences. The human's answer was strangely direct. "Perhaps you could explain your military doctrine?" Valdris asked. "We need to coordinate our strategies." Chun tilted her head slightly. "We adapt to the situation. Sometimes we attack from long range. Sometimes we get close. Sometimes we board their ships and fight hand-to-hand." "Hand-to-hand combat?" Cash spoke up, her skin now bright orange with shock. "In space battles? If that's what it takes to win." The room fell silent. Modern warfare had moved beyond personal combat centuries ago. Ships fought at vast distances using computers and advanced targeting systems. The idea of actually boarding an enemy vessel seemed insane. "Admiral," Valdris said carefully, "perhaps you should review our tactical database. We have fought the Void Devourers many times. There are proven methods." Chun looked at the holographic display showing the enemy fleet approaching the mining colony. Hundreds of dark ships moved in perfect formation. Each one was larger than anything in the human fleet. "How many battles have you won against them?" she asked. "We have achieved several strategic withdrawals that minimize casualties," Valdris replied. "That's not what I asked." Thek's claws extended slightly. In Kronari culture, such directness was nearly insulting. "We preserve our forces for when victory is possible. It is the logical approach." Chun studied the tactical display again. "You've been fighting them for 10 years. They've taken 12 colonies. You've never actually beaten them." "We have prevented total annihilation," Valdris said firmly. "Each species in the Confederation has survived because we do not waste lives in hopeless battles. Maybe that's the problem." The tension in the room increased. Valdris felt his diplomatic training taking over. These humans were new to galactic politics. They did not understand how civilized species conducted warfare. Admiral Chun, we appreciate your enthusiasm. The war is not about individual heroics. It requires careful planning, proper logistics, and acceptable risk assessment. Each life lost represents decades of education and cultural investment. Chun was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat. Do you want to save the mining colony or not? Of course, but we must be realistic about our chances. Then let us fight our way. You've tried yours for 10 years. Commander Thek stood up, his full height making him tower over the human. Your species has never faced the Void Devourers. You do not understand what you are suggesting. Chun looked up at him without backing down. You're right. We've never fought them before. But we fought each other for thousands of years. That is hardly the same thing. Maybe not. But we know how to win. Valdris decided to change the subject before things got worse. Very well. We will incorporate your forces into our battle plan. Your ships will provide support for our main attack formations. No, Chun's voice was firm. Our ships will lead the attack. That is unacceptable. Your fleet is too small, and your ships are not advanced enough. Chun pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic image of her fleet appeared above the table. Valdris counted 37 ships. Most were smaller than a single Confederation cruiser. These ships and their crews have been through more battles than your entire fleet combined. Every weapon has been tested in actual combat. Every tactic has been proven to work. Against other humans, Thek pointed out. Not against an enemy that destroys everything it touches. The principle is the same. You find the enemy and you make them stop fighting. Valdris felt a strange chill. There was something in the human admiral's voice that he did not understand. It was not anger or fear. It was something else. Something that made his survival instincts activate. Admiral, we cannot allow you to sacrifice your fleet in a futile gesture. Chun smiled for the first time since entering the room. It did not make Valdris feel better. General, with respect, you've been making futile gestures for 10 years. It's time to try something different. The human turned and walked toward the door. My fleet will engage the enemy in 6 hours. Your ships can follow if you want. After she left, the room remained quiet for several minutes. Sir, Cass said finally, should we stop them? Valdris looked at the tactical display again. The Void Devourer fleet would reach the colony in 8 hours. Confederation doctrine called for a fighting withdrawal to preserve forces. They would evacuate who they could and abandon the rest. No, he said slowly. We will observe. Perhaps we can learn something. Commander Thek's claws retracted. What could we possibly learn from watching them die? Valdris did not answer. But deep in his mind, a small voice wondered if the humans understood something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. The battle began exactly as Valdris had predicted. The Void Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark ships blocking out the stars. 200 vessels, each one designed for one purpose: complete destruction of everything they encountered. Human fleet is moving to intercept, reported Lieutenant Kess, her skin now a nervous purple. They're heading straight for the enemy formation. Valdris watched the tactical display in disbelief. Standard Confederation doctrine called for long-range engagement, careful positioning, and gradual withdrawal if the enemy proved too strong. The humans were doing the opposite. Their 37 ships accelerated directly toward the much larger enemy force. Sir, should we move to support them? Asked Commander Thek. Not yet. Let us see what they do. The first exchange of fire came at maximum weapons range. Confederation ships would have used this distance to probe enemy defenses and gather tactical data. The human ships opened with everything they had. Missiles, plasma cannons, and kinetic rounds poured from their crude vessels. Most of the shots missed or were absorbed by enemy shields. "Wasteful," Deck muttered. "They're depleting their ammunition supplies for minimal damage." But Valdris noticed something strange. The human ships were not trying to maintain formation. Instead, each vessel seemed to pick its own target and vector. Some dove below the main enemy formation. Others climbed above it. 3 ships actually accelerated past the enemy fleet entirely. "What are they doing?" Cass asked. Before anyone could answer, the human ships that had passed through the enemy formation turned around and began attacking from behind. At the same time, the ships that had gone above and below opened fire on the flanks. The Void Devourers suddenly found themselves under attack from 4 directions. "Interesting," Valdris admitted. "They've created multiple engagement zones." But then the humans did something that made every alien on the bridge stare in shock. One of the human destroyers, badly damaged and losing atmosphere, deliberately rammed into the side of a Void Devourer cruiser. The explosion tore both ships apart. "By the eternal void," Deck whispered. "They destroyed their own ship." "It was damaged beyond repair," Valdris said, trying to understand. "Perhaps the captain lost control." Another human ship, this one a small frigate, was being overwhelmed by 3 enemy vessels. Instead of trying to escape, the frigate turned directly toward the largest attacker and accelerated to ramming speed. "No," Cass said, her voice barely audible. "They're doing it on purpose." The frigate struck the enemy ship just as its reactor went critical. The resulting explosion destroyed all 4 vessels. Valdris felt his stomach twist. Confederation military doctrine was based on preservation of life and equipment. Every ship was valuable. Every crew member represented years of training and irreplaceable experience. The idea of deliberately throwing away such resources was incomprehensible. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chun. Put it through." Chun's face appeared on the main screen. Behind her, the bridge of her command ship was filled with smoke and sparks flew from damaged consoles. She looked completely calm. "General Valdris, my ships are moving to the 2nd phase of our attack. You might want to position your fleet to catch any runners. Admiral, you're taking heavy casualties. Perhaps it's time to withdraw." Chung glanced at something off-screen. "We've destroyed 18 enemy ships and damaged at least 30 more. Our casualties are within acceptable limits." Valdris looked at his own tactical display. The humans had lost 9 ships in the first 20 minutes of battle. Nearly a quarter of their force was gone. "Those are acceptable losses?" he asked. "We knew the cost going in." Every human ship captain volunteered for this mission. They understood what was expected. The transmission cut off before Valdris could respond. On the tactical display, the remaining human ships were regrouping for another attack run. But this time, they were doing something even stranger. "Sir," Cass reported, "the human ships they're docking with each other." It was true. Several of the smaller human vessels were connecting to larger ones. Within minutes, what had been 28 separate ships became 15 larger ones, with multiple crews working together. Why would they combine their forces now? Deck wondered. The answer came quickly. The combined human ships had concentrated their firepower and defensive capabilities. When they attacked again, each vessel hit much harder than before. But more importantly, when one section was damaged, the crew simply abandoned it and moved to another part of the combined ship. Human cruiser lost its entire front section to enemy fire. Instead of being destroyed, the crew sealed the damaged area and continued fighting from the rear compartments. When the engines were hit, they transferred to another ship in their cluster and kept fighting. They treat their ships like tools, Valdris realized, not as something to preserve. The strangest moment came when a human boarding pod launched from one of the damaged vessels. Valdres watched in amazement as it attached to a Void Devourer ship. Are they actually trying to board an enemy vessel? Cass asked. Through the tactical sensors, they could hear radio chatter from the human forces. Most of it was technical communication, but occasionally, someone would say something that made the aliens on the bridge look at each other in confusion. Echo team is aboard the enemy ship. Beginning interior demolition. Bravo leader, your ship is venting atmosphere. You need to evacuate. Negative. Still have weapons online. Continuing attack run. Bravo leader, your life support has failed. Copy that. Tell my wife I love her. Engaging enemy flagship. Valdres watched as the heavily damaged human ship, its hull cracked open to space, flew directly into the largest enemy vessel. The captain had stayed at his post, even though his ship was no longer able to sustain life. This is madness, Beck said quietly, but the madness was working. The Void Devourer formation was breaking apart. Ships that had never retreated from any battle were actually pulling back from the human attack. The enemy had superior numbers, better technology, and stronger ships. But they couldn't predict what the humans would do next. Sir, the enemy is requesting a temporary ceasefire, Cass reported. Valdres stared at the display. In 50 years of military service, he had never seen the Void Devourers ask for anything except surrender. The humans did that? Admiral Chun's voice came over the communication system. General Valdres, the enemy wants to talk. Should we let them? Valdres looked at the tactical display again. The human fleet had been reduced to 11 ships. All were damaged. Most were barely holding together. But they had destroyed or disabled over 40 enemy vessels. Admiral, your fleet is almost gone. Perhaps you should accept a ceasefire. That's not what I asked. Do you want to talk to them, or do you want us to finish this? The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the small human fleet facing down an enemy force that still outnumbered them 10-1. You would continue the attack? Valdres asked, if that's what it takes. Valdres realized that the humans were not asking for permission to retreat. They were asking for permission to continue attacking. Even though they were outnumbered, outgunned, and barely functional, they were ready to keep fighting. For the first time in his military career, General Valdres understood what real determination looked like. And it terrified him. Admiral Chun, he said slowly, let us hear what the enemy has to say. As the ceasefire took effect, Valdres found himself wondering which was more dangerous, the Void Devourers who consumed everything they touched, or the humans who seemed willing to die for anyone they considered an ally. The ceasefire lasted exactly 14 minutes. General Valdres listened to the Void Devourer transmission with growing unease. The enemy commander, speaking through mechanical translation, had never offered terms before. They had always simply attacked until everything was destroyed. We acknowledge human combat capability, the alien voice said through static. Withdraw your forces. We will consume only the mining colony. Other settlements will be spared. Admiral Chun's response was immediate and sharp. Negative. You leave this system now or we destroy all of you. Valdres felt his blood run cold. The human fleet was down to 11 ships. The enemy still had over 150 vessels. Accepting the offer would save thousands of lives at the mining colony. Admiral, he said over the private channel, they are offering to spare most of the system. Perhaps we should consider, General, with respect, you don't negotiate with terrorists or planet killers. You stop them. The ceasefire ended when a small human ship, damaged beyond repair, broke formation and headed directly for the enemy fleet. Valdres watched in horror as the vessel's captain began broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Defiant. My ship is finished. But I've still got one last surprise for you bastards. The ship's reactor was deliberately overloaded. The explosion was visible from across the system, and it took 3 enemy vessels with it. All human ships, resume attack, Chun ordered. Phase 3 protocols are now active. Valdris had no idea what Phase 3 meant, but he was about to find out. The remaining human ships began moving in a pattern he had never seen before. Instead of maintaining any kind of formation, they scattered completely. Each vessel began acting independently, like wild animals hunting in a pack. One human destroyer had lost most of its weapons but still had engines. The captain used his ship as a guided missile, steering it directly into an enemy battleship's engine section. Another ship, with only its forward guns working, attached itself to the hull of a Void Devourer cruiser and began firing at point-blank range through the enemy's armor. "Sir," Lieutenant Cass reported, her voice shaking, "we're detecting human life signs aboard 17 enemy ships. Boarding parties?" "No, sir. They're inside the enemy ships. We think they're using their own damaged vessels as boarding craft." The truth was worse than Valdris could have imagined. When human ships were too damaged to continue fighting normally, their crews were abandoning them and somehow getting inside enemy vessels. Once there, they were sabotaging critical systems, overloading reactors, and in some cases, simply setting off explosives. A transmission came from inside one of the enemy ships. "This is Sergeant Martinez. We've taken their engine room. Starting demolition now. Tell my kids I love them." The enemy ship exploded from the inside. Commander Thek was gripping his command console so tightly that his claws were leaving marks. "They're using their own people as living weapons." "No," Valdris said quietly, watching the tactical display. "They're not using them. Their people are choosing this." Another human transmission crackled through the communications system. Reactor team to command. "We're trapped in here with a dozen enemy soldiers. No way out. Recommend immediate reactor overload." Admiral Chun's voice was steady. "Negative. Stand by for evacuation." "Ma'am, with respect, there's no time. Enemy reinforcements are coming. If we don't blow this reactor now, they'll repair the damage." A long pause. Then Chun's voice, quieter than before. "Understood. Do it. Copy that. See you on the other side." Another enemy ship disappeared in a ball of fire. Valdris felt sick. The humans were not just willing to die for victory. They were eager to do it. Each sacrifice seemed to inspire the others to fight even harder. But the worst was yet to come. The human ship closest to the main enemy formation was the cruiser Normandy. It had taken massive damage and was drifting, apparently powerless. The Void Devourers moved to finish it off. "Normandy to all ships," came a calm voice. "This is Captain Hayes. We're dead in the water, but we've got one more play. Tom, get your people out of there," Admiral Chun ordered. "No can do, Admiral, but we can take a lot of them with us." The apparently dead ship suddenly came to life. Every weapon fired at once. Emergency power cells that had been saved for life support were redirected to weapons. The ship's entire missile supply launched in a single massive salvo. But that wasn't the horrifying part. "Sir," Cass whispered, "the Normandy is moving again." The ship was indeed moving, but not under engine power. The crew had detonated small charges along the hull, using the explosions to push their vessel toward the enemy formation. They were steering their dying ship with controlled explosions. "Engineering reports reactor containment at 15%, came the report from Normandy. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before total failure." "Copy that," Captain Hayes responded. "More than enough time." The Normandy crashed into the center of the enemy formation, just as its reactor went critical. The explosion destroyed 8 enemy ships and severely damaged a dozen more. Valdris stood in stunned silence. In 2 hours of battle, he had watched humans do things that no military academy in the galaxy would have taught. They had turned retreat into attack, damage into weapons, and death into victory. "General," Dex said quietly, "look at the enemy formation." Valdris turned his attention back to the tactical display. For the first time in the battle, the Void Devourers were not advancing. Their perfect formation had dissolved into scattered groups. Ships that had never shown fear were actually backing away from the remaining human vessels. There were only 6 human ships left. All were heavily damaged. Most had lost primary systems, but they were still moving, still fighting, still broadcasting messages of defiance. "This is Admiral Chun to all remaining ships. Enemy showing signs of confusion. Prepare for final assault." "Mom," came a voice from one of the damaged ships, "we're reading critical failures across all systems. Recommend evacuation to your vessel." "Negative. We finish this here." "Admiral, we're talking about maybe 20 minutes of life support left." Chun's laugh was audible over the communication system. "Then, we better make them count." The 6 remaining human ships began their final attack run. But this time, something had changed in the enemy response. The Void Devourers, who had never retreated from any battle in their history, were actually pulling back. "Sir," Kess reported in amazement, "the enemy fleet is withdrawing from the system." "What?" "They're leaving. All ships are moving to hyperspace jump points." Valdris stared at the display in disbelief. 160 enemy ships were retreating from 6 damaged human vessels. It was impossible. It violated every military principle he knew. Admiral Chun's voice came over the communication system one last time. "General Valdris, the system is secure. Recommend you move to assist the Mayan colony survivors." "Admiral, your casualties were acceptable. We stopped them, didn't we?" Valdris looked at the tactical display. In 3 hours of fighting, the humans had lost 31 ships and thousands of crew members. But they had forced an enemy that had never been defeated to retreat. They had saved the mining colony. They had achieved total victory. And Admiral Chun spoke about it as if it was just another day's work. "Yes," Valdris said slowly. "You stopped them." As he watched the surviving human ships limp toward the colony, Valdris realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Void Devourers had learned fear, but he suspected that soon everyone else would learn it too. General Valdris thought the horror was over. The Void Devourers had retreated, the Mayan colony was safe, and the surviving human ships were heading for repairs. He was wrong. The real horror was just beginning. "Sir, we're detecting incoming ships," Lieutenant Kess reported. "It's a Void Devourer pursuit fleet. 3 battleships and 20 escorts." Valdris felt his heart sink. The enemy had sent reinforcements to finish what their main fleet had started. The human ships were barely functional. His own fleet was still maintaining position outside the battle zone, following standard doctrine. "Order all ships to prepare for emergency withdrawal," he commanded. "We cannot face that force with our current resources." "General," came Admiral Chun's voice over the communication system, "we're detecting the incoming hostiles. Recommend you move your fleet to safety. We'll handle this." "Admiral, you have 6 damaged ships. The enemy has 23 fresh ones." "Copy that. We're working on it." Valdris was about to order his fleet to retreat when something happened that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Zephyrian Signs vessel Starseeker, which had been studying the battle from a safe distance, suddenly found itself cut off from the main fleet by the approaching enemy. The Signs vessel had minimal weapons and no real armor. Its crew of 47 researchers and technicians were not warriors. They were scholars, explorers, and doctors. Valdris watched in helpless anger as 3 enemy escorts moved to destroy the helpless ship That's when the humans did something that changed everything. "This is Captain Williams aboard the UES Hammer," came a transmission. "Starseeker, we're coming for you." The Hammer was one of the most damaged human ships. Its hull was cracked in 17 places. It had lost all missile weapons and most of its armor. The engines were held together with emergency welds. But it turned away from the safety of the colony and accelerated toward the trapped science vessel. "Captain Williams," Valdris transmitted urgently, "that ship is not your responsibility. Your mission is complete." "Negative, General. We don't leave people behind. Those are not your people. They are Zephyrian." There was a pause. Then Williams' voice came back, confused. "So?" Valdris stared at his communication console. "So?" The human didn't understand why the species difference mattered. To him, apparently, it didn't. The Hammer reached the Starseeker just as the enemy ships opened fire. The human vessel immediately placed itself between the science ship and the attackers, using its own hull as a shield. "Starseeker, this is Hammer. Stay behind us and prepare for emergency acceleration." Dr. Nelith, the Zephyrian expedition leader, sounded panicked. "Captain Williams, your ship is already badly damaged. You cannot protect us. Watch me." The Hammer opened fire with its remaining weapons. Against 3 enemy escorts, it should have been quickly destroyed. But somehow, Captain Williams kept his ship between the enemy and the science vessel, absorbing hit after hit while slowly moving both ships toward safety. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, came a report from inside the human ship. "Life support failing in forward sections. Seal the breaches and reroute power," Williams ordered calmly. "Sir, we're losing atmosphere faster than we can replace it." "Then, we better finish this quick." What happened next made every alien watching question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human ship, which should have been dead, suddenly accelerated to ramming speed toward the nearest enemy escort. "Captain, what are you doing?" Dr. Nelith asked, clearing the road. "Starseeker, get ready to run." The Hammer struck the enemy ship at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a massive fireball. But in the seconds before impact, the human ship had launched all of its escape pods toward the Starseeker. "Starseeker, this is Lieutenant Chun. Captain Williams is dead, but we've still got work to do. Pick us up and let's get you home." Dr. Nelith was so shocked he could barely speak. You destroyed your own ship to save us. That's what friends do." The escape pods were recovered, and the Starseeker began moving toward the safety of the Confederation fleet. But the other enemy ships were still pursuing. That's when the second impossible thing happened. The remaining human ships, all of them barely functional, turned away from the colony and moved to intercept the enemy pursuit fleet. "All ships. This is Admiral Chun. We've got Zephyrian people to protect. Standard doctrine is now in effect." "Mom," came a voice from one of the ships. "Standard doctrine against 22 enemy vessels?" "Affirmative. Maximum aggression protocols." Valdris realized he was about to watch 6 dying human ships attack a fresh enemy fleet to protect one Zephyrian science vessel. It was military suicide. It was tactically insane, but it was also the most noble thing he had ever witnessed. The human attack was unlike anything they had done before. Instead of their usual chaotic tactics, they moved in perfect coordination. Each ship knew exactly where the others would be. They covered each other's weaknesses and maximized each other's strengths. But more than that, they fought with an intensity that seemed impossible from ships that should have been derelicts. "Reactor output at 120%, came a report from the UE's Valkyrie. "Sir, that will cause critical overload within minutes." "Minutes is all we need. Zephyrian ship gets home safe." The battle was vicious and short. The human ships tore into the enemy formation like wild beasts protecting their young. They used every trick they had learned in the previous battle, plus several new ones that Valdris had never imagined. When the UES Defiance lost all weapons, its captain rammed the ship into an enemy battleship's command section. When the UE's Liberty's engines failed, the crew used emergency thrusters to position their ship as a shield for their allies. But the moment that broke Valdris's understanding of everything came when Marine Sergeant Marcus Cole's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, the Zephyrian ship has taken a hit. Their life support is failing. How many aboard?" 43 scientists and researchers, plus 12 humans from the Hammer. Can we reach them? Negative. Enemy ships are between us and them. But I've got an idea. Sergeant Cole was aboard the UES Retribution, which had lost most of its hull to enemy fire. The ship was essentially a flying engine with some weapons attached. "Cole, whatever you're thinking, don't do it," Admiral Chun ordered. "Ma'am, those Zephyrian people saved my brother's life when he was sick on Earth. Dr. Nelith personally flew to our planet to deliver medicine. I owe them? You don't owe anyone your life." "Yes, ma'am, I do." The Retribution broke formation and flew directly toward the damaged Starseeker. Enemy ships moved to intercept, but Cole had timed it perfectly. His ship reached the science vessel just as its life support finally failed. "Starseeker, this is Retribution. Opening our emergency airlock. Get your people over here now." "Sergeant Cole, your ship cannot support that many people. We'll make it work." What followed was the most desperate rescue operation in recorded history. 55 beings transferred from the dying science vessel to the heavily damaged human ship. The Retribution's life support was designed for 20 people. It now carried almost 3 times that number. "Life support at critical levels," came the report. "Oxygen will be depleted in 18 minutes. Then we better get home fast," Cole replied. The overloaded human ship began its run toward safety. Enemy vessels moved to intercept, but the other human ships formed a protective screen around their fleeing comrade. "This is Admiral Chun to all ships. Retribution has our people. Get them home." One by one, the remaining human ships sacrificed themselves to keep the rescue ships safe. They rammed enemy vessels, overloaded their reactors, and threw their lives away without hesitation. All to protect the ship full of Zephyrian scientists they had known for less than a day. The UES Retribution reached the Confederation fleet with 7 minutes of life support remaining. Sergeant Cole had saved 55 beings, 43 of whom were not even his own species. When Dr. Nelith was safely aboard the Starbreaker, he approached General Valdris with tears in his eyes. "General, I do not understand. Why did they do this? We are not human. We are not their responsibility." Valdris looked out at the wreckage of the human fleet. 6 ships had become one. Thousands of human lives had been lost to save 43 Zephyrians. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I think that to them, it doesn't matter." And that, General Valdris realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. The humans didn't just fight for their own kind. They fought for anyone they considered part of their group. And apparently, fighting alongside them for even a few hours was enough to earn that protection. The galaxy was full of species that would ally for mutual benefit. But the humans were something else entirely. They were a species that would die for strangers. 3 days after the battle, General Valdris sat in the conference room aboard his flagship, staring at Admiral Chun's after-action report. The numbers were impossible to ignore, but equally impossible to accept. Human casualties: 2,847 dead, 312 wounded. Ship losses: 36 vessels destroyed, 1 heavily damaged. Enemy casualties: 89 ships destroyed, 34 damaged beyond repair. Complete withdrawal of remaining forces. In any other military, such losses would be called a disaster. Admiral Chun had listed them under mission successful, objectives achieved. General, Dr. Nellis said quietly from across the table, I have been studying the human tactical recordings. I believe I understand what happened. Valdris looked up. The Zephyrian scientist had not spoken much since his rescue. When he did speak, his voice carried a strange weight. Tell me, Doctor. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to protect. For them, there is no difference between victory and ensuring that those under their care survive. Commander Thek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That explains their tactics, but not their losses. No rational species accepts such casualties for a mining colony. They were not protecting the mining colony, Dr. Nellis continued. They were protecting us. All of us. Anyone who stood with them became their responsibility. The door to the conference room opened, and Admiral Chun entered. She looked tired but not defeated. Her uniform was clean, but Valdris could see burn marks on her hands from working on damaged ships. Admiral, Valdris said, standing. Please, join us. Chun sat down and placed a datapad on the table. I've completed the casualty notifications. All families have been contacted. How do you tell parents that their children died for strangers? Thek asked bluntly. Chun looked at him with calm eyes. I tell them their children died protecting innocent people. That's enough for most human families. But they were not your people to protect. Yes, they were. The simple certainty in her voice made Valdris feel cold. He pulled up the tactical recordings and pointed to a specific moment in the battle. Admiral here. Your ship, the Liberty, was badly damaged. You could have withdrawn. Instead, you positioned yourself to protect the Chronari destroyer Thunder's Edge. Why? Chun glanced at the display. Commander Krath requested assistance with engine repairs. So you risked your entire crew for one Chronari ship. Commander Krath and his crew were fighting beside us. That made them part of our fleet. Dr. Nelith leaned forward. Admiral, when did we become part of your fleet? When did you decide to protect us? Chun thought about it for a moment. When you agreed to fight alongside us, I suppose. Maybe when General Valdris allowed us to lead the attack. At that point, you were our allies. And allies are worth dying for. Of course. The room fell silent. Valdris realized that to Admiral Chun, the logic was perfectly clear. Fighting together created bonds that transcended species, politics, or even common sense. Once the humans accepted someone as an ally, they would treat them exactly like family. Admiral, Valdris said carefully, your species has been in space for less than a century. You have no long-term strategic interests in this region. You gain nothing from this battle except casualties. Why would you commit so completely to protecting people you barely know? Chun's expression didn't change. General, if I saw you being attacked tomorrow, would you expect me to help you? Yes, I suppose I would. Why? Because we are allies. Exactly. Valdris stared at her. Somehow, the simple question had turned his own logic against him. If he expected human help, then he had to accept human protection methods. Commander Thek tried a different approach. Admiral, your tactics work against enemies like the Void Devourers, who can be intimidated. But what if you face an enemy that cannot be frightened? What if you encounter a foe that matches your own willingness to die? Chun smiled for the first time since entering the room. Then it would be an interesting fight. The casual way she said it made Valdris's blood freeze. The idea of an interesting fight between two species willing to sacrifice everything was the stuff of nightmares. The Confederation Council has reviewed the battle recordings, Valdris said finally. They want to offer humanity full membership in our alliance. That's generous. There are, however, some concerns about human military doctrine. Chen's smile faded. What kind of concerns? The Council feels that human tactics, while effective, are unpredictable. There is worry that your methods might escalate conflicts unnecessarily. You mean we fight too hard? You fight without regard for acceptable losses. Other species prefer more measured approaches. Chun stood up slowly. General, how many colonies have the Void Devourers taken in the last 10 years? 12. How many people have died in those attacks? Valdres checked his data pad. Approximately 2.8 million. And how many have they taken since we arrived? None, but how many will they take next month? Valdres hesitated. Intelligence reports suggested the enemy fleet was regrouping, but their attack patterns had become erratic since the defeat. Unknown. Possibly none. Then our methods work. Dr. Nellis spoke up quietly. Admiral, I think the concern is not whether your methods work, but what happens when other species adopt them. Chun turned to look at him. What do you mean? If everyone fights like humans, every battle becomes total war. Every conflict becomes a fight to the death, as opposed to the current system, where aggressors know that civilized species will accept reasonable losses and negotiate rather than fight to the end. The question hung in the air. Valdres realized that the human admiral had identified the fundamental flaw in Confederation military doctrine. By being reasonable, predictable, and unwilling to accept major casualties, they had taught their enemies that aggression could be profitable. So what are you saying? Zek asked. That the galaxy needs to become more violent? I'm saying the galaxy needs to become more committed. If the Void Devourers knew that attacking any Confederation world would result in their complete destruction, regardless of cost, how many attacks do you think they would attempt? Valdres found himself nodding despite his horror. The logic was sound, even if the implications were terrifying. The Council has decided, he said finally, to limit human involvement in future military operations. Chen's expression didn't change. I see. Your species will be welcome as members of the Confederation, but human fleets will only be used in defensive operations within your own territory. You're afraid of us. It wasn't a question. Valdres looked around the table at the faces of his officers and colleagues. Dr. Nellith was staring at his hands. Commander Zek was gripping his chair. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Yes, Valdres admitted. We are afraid of you. Chun nodded slowly. That's probably wise. We scare ourselves sometimes. She picked up her datapad and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned back to face them. General, if you ever need us, really need us, you know how to contact Earth. We'll come running, even after this decision. Especially after this decision. That's what allies do. After she left, the room remained quiet for several minutes. Sir, Dr. Nellith said finally, I believe we have made a terrible mistake. How so? We have just told the one species willing to die for strangers that we no longer trust them to protect us. Commander Zek leaned back in his chair. Perhaps that is for the best. Order is better than chaos. Is it? Dr. Nellith asked. The Void Devourers brought order to 12 colonies. Perfect, silent order. Valdres looked out the viewport at the debris field where the battle had taken place. Somewhere in that wreckage were the remains of 36 human ships and nearly 3,000 human crew members. People who had died protecting aliens they had never met. 3 months later, when the Void Devourers returned with a massive fleet and attacked the Confederation's core worlds, the Council's first emergency action was to send a message to Earth. Please help us. The human response came within hours. Already on our way. General Valdres realized then that they had not tamed humanity or made the galaxy safer. They had simply learned what it felt like to live without guardians who treated death as just another tool for protecting their friends. And it was the loneliest feeling in the universe.